Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Can you just believe your way to wealth? Manifest your own destiny? Does the universe owe you a yacht if you journal hard enough? Today in the rLounge, if you just believe hard enough, maybe money will simply materialize in your pockets. Or not. Parents tried to guilt me into giving my savings to my brother, so I used it to buy an expensive gift for myself. I might look sleazy writing this because my cousin has told me it's not a big deal, but I wanted to see what people across the internet think about this, even before I tell my friends. My dad is 67, my mom is 61, and I'm currently 24 female. I used to feel bad about the age gap between me and my parents growing up. They always seemed too old to do things the other kids' parents did. No spontaneous trips to the park, no fun family outings. And I only got to see Disney World as a teenager when I had no apparent interest in it. It felt like they were always tired or preoccupied. At least that's what I thought, until my younger brother came into the picture. Somehow, when he was born, their energy magically reappeared. I don't know what it was about me that made them treat me differently, but it always felt like I had to grow up fast while he got to stay as a kid. From a young age, I was expected to take care of my brother. I wasn't just his sibling. I was his nanny, cleaner, and sometimes even his cook. My parents always said that since they had spent so much time and resources raising me, it was now my turn to pay them back by helping with my brother. At the same time, I didn't really question it. I figured it was normal. And besides, I genuinely cared about my brother. I thought that when he grew up, he'd have my back and stand up for me when necessary, especially against my folks. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. So wrong. He was never expected to do much around the house. I would be running around cleaning up after everyone while he watched his cartoons, left his stuff everywhere, and conveniently forgot to do even the simplest chores. But if I mistakenly left my novels or bag lying around in the living room, all hell would let loose. My parents never got on his case about his annoying ways, though. Their excuse? He's just a kid. And when he grew older, it was, he's going to be the head of the family. He needs to focus on his education so he can take care of us in the future. Or my personal favorite, you're a woman. You should get used to taking care of others. Like, seriously? Back then, I wanted to scream at them so badly sometimes because it seemed like they didn't know just how many daughters ended up being the ones to take care of their parents. But I knew better than to argue. It wasn't worth it. My parents are rather traditional Asians, so if you know, you know. Moreover, it wasn't in my nature to really go back and forth with people. I prefer to just listen to music or read novels or manhwas in my room. Even as a child, it became painfully obvious that my brother got the best of everything while I was expected to just make do. When he wanted a new gaming console, my parents got it for him without a second thought. When he wanted designer sneakers, they found a way to afford them, even if it meant stretching the budget. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I didn't get new things too, but it was just a tiny percentage of the overall things I did ask for. It was neither as swift, expensive, or the exact thing that I had asked for. Not like I ever did ask for anything extravagant. If they did eventually buy it, before they did, I would have been lectured on being financially responsible and not wasting money. Birthdays were the only thing where the same effort was put in for both of us. Still, it stung knowing that no matter how hard I worked or how little I asked for, my wants were never a priority, but his every whim was met with open arms and open wallets. My brother also had this thing where he would deliberately ignore the fact that I'm lactose intolerant. He would pour milk into my coffee or tea and then laugh it off like it was some harmless prank. The first couple of times I brushed it off, but after the time when he poured in enough to cause me 2 whole days of dealing with stomach cramps, I snapped. He just smirked and called me sensitive. My parents? They said he was just joking and that I should lighten up. The only thing that kept me sane, especially when staying in my room couldn't drown them out, was getting out of the house whenever I could. Since I wasn't allowed to go clubbing or participate in most school extracurricular activities, I started working. On weekends, I worked as a secretary for an NGO that centered on organizing knitting workshops. During the week, I picked up shifts at a gas station. These jobs weren't glamorous, but they gave me freedom. Plus, I got to meet people, have conversations that weren't about chores, and most importantly, escape the madness at home. Of course, as soon as I started making money, my parents wanted to find a new way to squeeze me dry. They insisted I pitch in on the household bills. Then, I was barely making enough to save anything. But according to them, it was only fair since I was living under their roof. I stood my ground on that one and only paid what I felt like it, or just chipped in groceries. Meanwhile, my brother, he got to spend his time chasing his dream of joining a boy band. The only time he ever clashed with my parents was when they told him to focus on his studies instead. But even then, he still got his way. They funded his entire band setup, bought him a guitar, and whatever else he needed. While I was busting my butt working 2 jobs, he was out living his best life, and somehow they just didn't notice that he was watching music videos all day and not studying like he had promised them he would. At first, I supported his little boy band dream. I mean, why not? But over time, I started noticing a pattern. Anything that mattered to me, he couldn't care less. Whenever I needed help or support, he was either too busy or just didn't care enough to show up. Yet when it came to his goals, everyone had to stop what they were doing to cater to him. He was even allowed to go to things with his friends past the curfew time they gave me, and I was the older one. The double standard was exhausting, and honestly, it was starting to piss me off. My frustration built up over the years, but I still held it in. I told myself it wouldn't matter soon because in just a few months, I would be off to college. I'd finally leave the house and step into the world to become somebody, to carve out a life that was mine. That thought kept me going. I had finished high school at the relatively late age of 19, but finally, it was time to chase my dream of going to college. I got accepted into a STEM major with a partial scholarship. Of course, my parents paid the remainder of my tuition and other expenses, and maybe that's why they still felt entitled to dictate my life. Maybe, deep down, they had figured out that I might be the one to save them financially in the future. I don't really know, but that's how I felt. I had hoped that the university would grant me some freedom, a reprieve from their constant control, but I quickly realized that their tyranny extended beyond the walls of our home. Every vacation we had, I was expected to come back home, likely to help out around the house. It didn't matter that I was exhausted from school or that I wanted time to focus on my own life. My brother was still, in their eyes, just a child and capable of doing anything for himself. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to say no. But at that point, what could I really do? For months at that point, my parents had been all up on my butt about what my brother would do after graduating from high school, constantly nagging me to go have the talk with him. "You are the eldest, and you have to convince him to do something with his life," my mom would say, as if it was somehow my job to parent their son. How about you, the actual people who raised the brat, sat him down and talked to him? Or better yet, if he refuses, why not keep babying him like you always have been? Let him sit around and do nothing while you keep feeding him and covering for his laziness until you're old and gray. But they wouldn't let up, and honestly, I was just tired of hearing it. So I just went to talk to him. First of all, my brother's annoying AF. Wouldn't come out for a talk, and wouldn't open his door either. So imagine us having a conversation with me standing outside his door, having to raise my voice so he could hear me. I think what I said to him was something along the lines of, "Mom and Dad are pissed at you, and they won't shut up about you going to college. Can you just, I don't know, do something so they stop breathing down my neck about it?" Or something like that. He shot back with some nonsense about how college was a scam, how the real rich guys were making money through crypto and stocks, and how he'd used the money gained to fund his boy band. He started talking about building his mindset and gaining power. And I remember just listening to him, wondering who the hell had been feeding him this garbage. Because the last I checked, he needed money to trade in the first place. And where did he think he was going to get that? Our parents? I told him he was out of his dang mind. That's when he got mad, cussing me out, and then started rambling about how he was going to make it big, streaming and creating content. I think I laughed for a solid minute. "Oh yeah? And how's that going? Are you making money yet?" And the best he could come up with was some excuse about how it takes time or whatever. Right. And in the meantime, you're just going to keep mooching off of Mom and Dad while they stress about your future. I think that part got to him because he actually stepped out of his room and said something about how I probably thought he should just go to college and waste his time. I remember leaning against the door frame and telling him that if he was so sure that he didn't need college, then he should prove it. Get a job and start making money. And if he could do that, I would give him some money. Otherwise, he should just do what literally everyone else does and at least have a degree to fall back on. He just stared at me for a long moment before storming back into his room and slamming the door, muttering something about how he had an exam coming up and I shouldn't even think about knocking on his door for the next few weeks. I don't know what kind of magic I worked that day, but the funny thing was that somehow I convinced him. And just like that, my parents were suddenly so nice to me. The nagging stopped, they stopped hounding me about coming home for the holidays, and they were just weirdly pleasant. It felt unnatural. For years, I had been treated like an afterthought, and now that their precious son had finally agreed to do something with his life, I was suddenly worth being nice to? Something felt off, and I had a bad feeling about it. It came to a head 2 weeks ago. I came home because I needed to grab a few things before I started working on my dissertation. After getting them, I figured I might as well stop by my parents' house. Just to show my face and keep the peace. I barely had time to sit before Dad said he needed to talk. Something in his tone already had me on edge. Then Mom chimed in about my brother's college fees, and that's when I knew this was about to be some crap. I remember shifting in my seat confused. What does this have to do with me? I asked. I wasn't even working yet, so why were they bringing this up? Mom sighed like she was trying to be patient. You'll be done with school soon. It's time to start thinking about your responsibilities. Dad added that families help each other and that I should contribute to my brother's education. I laughed. Not just a chuckle, a real, full-on laugh, because the suggestion, which was more of a command, was ridiculous. How? I don't have a job. That's when they brought up my savings. I should have known that was where they were heading when they first asked me to talk to my brother months ago. Now, let me put this in perspective. They knew exactly how much I had put myself through to get that money saved. Apart from the NGO and gas station gigs, from time to time I had taken on ridiculous side gigs and skipped out on trips with friends. Every single thing I did was to leave my parents' house, but later on, it was just to make sure I had some kind of financial cushion when I couldn't take what they were dishing anymore. It wasn't even that much, just enough that I wouldn't be completely stranded if things didn't go as planned. So for them to sit there and act like it was some sort of community fund was insane. I think I said something along those lines because Dad started ranting about how it wasn't fair for my brother to struggle while I had money just sitting there. But I myself struggled to make that much money. Didn't I matter? They were his parents. That was their responsibility, not mine. I told them exactly that, pointing out that they were both still working with actual salaries so they could cover his fees. That set Mom off. She started waving her hands around, talking about how they had done so much for me, and now I wanted to be selfish. You think we have endless money? She snapped. Same script, different day. Dad, now fully annoyed, went on about how I wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for them raising me. I cut him off. And I'm grateful, but let's not pretend I didn't get the short end of the stick here. I was done sugarcoating. I told him about how they had always prioritized him. He got whatever he wanted growing up. I had to hear no my whole life, and they wanted to tell me that my savings should go to him? No. Dad must have stood up because I heard his chair scrape back, and he said I was being disrespectful. I did something in that moment that I will be forever proud of. After the room fell silent, I told them to follow me so I could give them the money for my brother's fees. They hesitated, looking skeptical. I told them to either come with me or drop the subject entirely. In the end, they followed me straight to my brother's room. He was still lying on his bed, headphones in, glued to his phone. They looked at me, confused, and asked why I had taken them there. I pointed at his gaming setup, his PC, the cameras, the lights, and all his expensive gear. If you need money for him, sell his stuff. He's got a setup worth a semester's tuition. My mother clutched her chest like I had suggested selling one of her kidneys. Dad started pacing, full-on yelling now. You think you can talk to us like this? We're your parents. You owe us. You think you're grown because you have little money? I guess he was loud enough to pull my brother out of whatever game he was playing because suddenly he looked up. And of course, as soon as my mom saw him, she softened. Sweetheart, don't worry about this. Your sister just doesn't understand the meaning of family. I can never forget that line. I just shook my head and told my mom that she always centered everything around my brother. Dad caught that and then turned back to me, pointing. If you don't want to be part of this family, then leave. Pack your things and go. Since you think you're so independent, go figure it out on your own. My mom, unsurprisingly, supported her husband, saying that I'd be fine since I had a dorm room. She also mentioned that they'd be able to rent my place out and get some extra money to use for their son. And that was the moment I knew I was done. I didn't hesitate. I shrugged and said, all right. My mother was shocked. My dad didn't say anything much, just that I should pack my things before the week was over and leave the room. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked out. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry, but I did cry my way back to school. It hurt me like crazy. I can't even lie. And I wanted to hurt them back. I wanted to spend that money on something that was really not important but needed. The day I was supposed to leave, I made sure to pull up in my new car for myself, ribbons and all. Nothing flashy, but it was mine, bought and paid for with my own hard-earned money. It was reliable, something that would last me for years. When I stepped out, they were both standing at the door, arms crossed. Mom's eyes immediately went to the car. Where did you get that? I told her that I bought it. My dad scoffed. With what money? With the money you thought you were going to take from me. I couldn't help but to dangle the keys obnoxiously. My bad, I know. Mom's mouth actually fell open. Dad, of course, started yelling again. So this is how you treat us after everything we've done for you? I laughed. Honestly, in the whole fight, I laughed more than I cried. What have they done for me? Do they mean raising me? Feeding me? Doing the bare minimum as parents? Because let's be real, they only ever cared about my brother, but I did not even bother to reply back. As I went in to pack, I remember my mom was telling my father to calm down, persuading him to let me stay because I was the only one with a good, steady car. Even at that moment, she was still thinking of my brother. as his own vehicle was constantly in and out of the mechanics. When I got out of the house, before my dad or mom could say a word, I told them that I wouldn't stay, even if they begged me, and that I was already looking at apartments for after graduation. That was when they started to panic. I was doing well in school, my future looked solid, and they were realizing what cutting me off actually meant. They thought guilt-tripping me would work the way it always had, but not this time. With that, I packed up the little I had left at home. Most of my stuff was already in my dorm anyway. I got in my car, started the engine, and without another glance at the house I once called home, I drove away. And just like that, I was free. Of course, my mother has been trying to get me to talk ever since, with many calls and text messages that I have yet to answer. She's roped in my grandparents and extended family, all telling me to apologize and make peace. Apologize for what? What do you think? Did I actually do something wrong in all of this? Suddenly, you need to step up? Adorable. Tell them you'll gladly help, right after they reimburse you for 24 years of unpaid labor and emotional damages. The sheer confidence of someone who contributes nothing but vibes and entitlement to the world is truly something to behold. If they want to coddle him forever, that's on them. But you're free. Let them be shocked when reality slaps him in the face. You're already carrying enough, and you don't need to carry their delusions too. Share your thoughts on this in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.